Picture a sleek black box, about the size of a desktop printer, sitting in a pharmacy near your home. You prick your finger. A single drop of blood, smaller than a teardrop, falls into a tiny cartridge. And that box runs not one test, but hundreds. Cholesterol, infections, cancer markers, all from one drop. No needles, no vials, no lab. That was the promise that built a company worth $9 billion, put a 30-year-old woman on the cover of every business magazine in America, and made her, on paper, the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world. There was just one problem. The box didn't work. Not worked poorly. Not needed a little more time. It fundamentally, physically, could not do the thing it was sold to do, and the people running the company knew it. But here's the part that should unsettle you: for years, it didn't matter. The lie outran the truth. Real doctors ordered real tests for real patients on a machine that was, in the most important sense, a prop. So how does a fantasy raise $9 billion? Stay with me, because the answer isn't about technology at all. It's about the oldest con there is, wearing a lab coat. Her name was Elizabeth Holmes. She dropped out of Stanford at 19, took her tuition money, and founded a company she called Theranos, a blend of the words therapy and diagnosis. She had a story, and it was a good one. She said she was terrified of needles. She spoke of an uncle lost to a cancer that might have been caught earlier with cheaper, more frequent testing. She wanted to democratize healthcare, to put a lab in every home, so no one would ever get bad news too late again. She wore a black turtleneck, deliberately echoing another famous college dropout who had changed the world. She spoke in a low, deliberate voice about a future she could see and you couldn't yet. And people believed her, not because they had watched the technology work, but because they wanted the story to be true. Hold on to that. A great con doesn't sell you a product. It sells you a version of the future you already wish were real, and then dares you to be the cynic who doubts it. Holmes wasn't selling a blood test. She was selling hope in a black turtleneck. And hope is very, very hard to audit. Now, if you're going to build a company on a machine that doesn't work, you have a problem. Sooner or later, someone technical is going to look under the hood. Holmes solved that problem brilliantly by making sure the people around her weren't technical at all. Look at the board of directors she assembled. 2 former United States Secretaries of State. A former Secretary of Defense. Retired generals and admirals. Statesmen whose names carried the weight of nations. It was, on paper, one of the most prestigious boards in American corporate history. And notice what it was almost completely missing. Scientists. Doctors. Anyone who actually understood diagnostics. This is the second gear of the machine, and it may be the sharpest one. Prestige became a substitute for proof. Investors looked at those legendary names and thought, surely, with people like that watching, someone has checked. But the great men weren't there to check the science. They were there to be seen. Their reputations formed a golden wall around the company. And behind that wall, no one was asking the only question that actually mattered: does the box work? Here is the quiet law of the long con: the bigger the names out front, the fewer the questions in the back. So let's open the box. The device had a name worthy of the mythology, the Edison, after America's great inventor. The pitch was that it could run hundreds of different tests on that single drop of finger-prick blood. But biology is stubborn. A drop of blood from your fingertip is tiny, and it isn't clean, it's mixed with tissue fluid and squeezed from crushed cells. Running hundreds of accurate tests on so small and so imperfect a sample was not a difficult engineering problem. In many cases, it was closer to impossible. So what did they actually do? Behind the curtain, when the Edison couldn't perform, Theranos secretly ran many of its tests on ordinary, commercially available machines, the very kind of lab equipment, made by other companies, that Holmes publicly dismissed as obsolete. And to make the tiny finger stick samples fit those standard machines, they diluted them, watered them down, which pushed the readings outside the ranges those machines were designed to measure accurately. Sit with the absurdity of that. The revolutionary company, here to cure the world of the old ways, was hiding other people's machines in a back room, feeding them watered-down blood, and hoping the numbers came out close enough. The magic trick had a man behind the curtain the entire time. But investors and partners still needed to see it work. So Theranos mastered the demonstration, the single most dangerous tool in the con artist's kit. When an important visitor arrived to watch the Edison run their blood, the fingerstick would go into the device, the machine would whir impressively, and a result would appear on the screen. What the visitor didn't know was that, at times, the machine wasn't really analyzing anything at all. In some accounts, a demo device was quietly rigged to display a stored, normal-looking result, no matter what was actually happening inside it. The whirring was theater. And wrapped around all of it was a wall of secrecy so extreme it should have been the loudest alarm of all. Employees were siloed, forbidden from discussing their work with one another. Visitors were kept far away from the real labs. Anyone who asked too many questions was managed, isolated, or pushed out the door. Holmes framed the secrecy as protection, trade secrets, jealous competitors, the ordinary paranoia of a company sitting on world-changing ideas. But secrecy does two things at once. It guards a real invention, and it hides the absence of one. And here's the trap: from the outside, those two look exactly the same. And here is where this stops being a business story and becomes something much darker. Because unlike a forged painting or a Ponzi scheme, this lie did not only cost people money. Theranos put its tests into real pharmacies. Real patients, people who had never once heard the word valuation, walked in, gave that single drop of blood, and got results back. Results that were, in many documented cases, simply wrong. Imagine being told your blood shows a catastrophe that isn't there. Or, far worse, being told everything is fine when it is not. One woman reportedly received a result suggesting a miscarriage that hadn't happened. Others got wildly inaccurate readings for serious conditions. Doctors made decisions, real decisions, about real bodies, based on numbers a watered-down sample coughed up on a borrowed machine. This is what separates Theranos from your ordinary swindle. Fake it till you make it is a Silicon Valley prayer, and inside an app that shows the wrong bus time, faking it is harmless. But there are domains where the lie has a body count. Where move fast and break things quietly means breaking people. Blood is one of those domains. The con had left the boardroom and entered the bloodstream. So who finally stopped it? Not the famous board. Not the celebrated investors. Not the regulators, at least not first. It was the young ones, the people with the least power and the most to lose. There was a young scientist, the grandson of one of those legendary statesmen on the board, who took a job at Theranos believing in the dream, and slowly realized the numbers did not add up. When he raised concerns, he was reportedly pressured and threatened with lawsuits by his own grandfather's company. There was another young employee who saw the failing quality control data and refused to look away. These whistleblowers risked their careers, their savings, and years of legal terror to say a single sentence out loud, "It doesn't work." And there was a journalist, John Carreyrou of the Wall Street Journal, who listened to them when almost no one else would, and in 2015 published the investigation that finally cracked the Golden Wall. Notice who the heroes turn out to be in this story. Not the powerful, who had every resource to check and didn't. The powerless, who had every reason to stay silent and refused. That is almost always how these things actually end. Once the first crack appeared, the whole structure came down with astonishing speed. Regulators inspected the labs and were horrified by what they found. The $9 billion valuation didn't shrink, it evaporated, all the way to zero. Partnerships were shredded. The magazine covers that had crowned her became evidence against her. And in 2022, Elizabeth Holmes, once hailed as the next great American inventor, was convicted of fraud for deceiving investors and sentenced to years in federal prison. The woman in the black turtleneck, who had promised to democratize healthcare, was found to have deceived the very people who trusted her most. But I want to be careful here, because it would be comforting to end on justice was done and simply walk away. Comforting and dangerous. Because if you file Theranos under the one uniquely gifted liar got caught, you will miss the real lesson and you'll be perfectly primed to fall for the next one. The machinery that raised $9 billion for an empty box was not magic, and it was not unique to her. It is a pattern. And once you can see the pattern, you can never quite unsee it. So let's lay the machine out on the table, gear by gear, because it is still running right now. Gear 1, the irresistible future. Sell people not a product but a version of tomorrow they already ache to believe in, cheaper, kinder, revolutionary, until doubt itself starts to feel like cynicism. Gear 2, borrowed authority. Surround the empty center with names so prestigious that everyone assumes someone else has already checked, when no one has. Gear 3, secrecy as a shield, sold to you as protection, because from the outside, guarding a miracle and hiding a void look precisely the same. And Gear 4, the demonstration. A whirring box, a rigged screen, one moment of theater that lets belief override evidence. Put those 4 gears together, and you can raise a fortune on almost nothing, in a startup, a fund, a miracle cure, a political promise. And the defense costs you nothing but a question, asked plainly and repeated until it's answered. Forget the visionary, forget the famous board, forget the beautiful story, show me the box working, with my own sample, in the open. If they can't, or won't, you already have your answer. So let me ask you, where have you seen this exact machine running lately? The dazzling future, the borrowed names, the demo you were never allowed to inspect? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one.